Hey everyone, it's Daniel Elwood, and my co-host is Robert Paul Johnson. We are the Last Nighters. You can find us on the Launchpad Media, where they're always launching new ideas in your direction. Check it out at thelaunchpadmedia.com. Tonight is episode 145 of the show. We're going to be talking about Demolition Man. So I got a little intro I can read to you here. It says, Mellow greetings, listeners. We're about to be fined multiple credits for repeated violations of the verbal morality statute as we invite our maniac friend, Snobby Bobby of the Not For Everyone podcast on to discuss the 90s classic Demolition Man. Snobby Bobby was with us a few short months ago, though it feels like ages in the age of COVID, for July 4th on The Patriot, the Mel Gibson rebel-rousing, beautiful film that was. So, Snobby Bobby, welcome back. We enjoyed having you on before, and you and I, in the pre-show content, we were talking about how you only maintain a Facebook at all just so that you and I can share memes. So I appreciate that. That's a very strong connection. It's a very Chad-like connection that we still share. Welcome back, Snobby Bobby.
Hey, thanks a lot. That's the only way I can get in touch with you too. So thanks for the memes and the invitation back on the show. And I'm very excited to be talking about Demolition Man from 1993, which is I will go on a limb and say it's a little more my wheelhouse than The Patriot, although The Patriot episode was a lot of fun.
Yeah, I especially enjoyed the Patriot episode, but also the pre-show and post-show content that you shared with us, or that you and I, we all created together in a collective socialist experiment in our kibbutz or our own little commune. But you were talking about your love of all things Bigfoot and conspiracy theories and all of that stuff. So I thought that, we were kindred spirits. And so I'm very happy to have you back. And
wow.
I'm trying not to lay it on too thick for you here, but
when the Grinch's heart grows like 3 times too big, I just felt that.
Yeah.
When you said those things. So thanks for having me back. That's always a good sign when you get invited back.
Yeah. So tell everyone, before I get into Google description, we talk about this movie, what you do on your show and where people can find it.
I am host of the Not For Everyone podcast, or just search Not For Everyone podcast. We're on Spotify, Stitcher, is it still iTunes, Apple Podcasts, all that stuff. It's another movie podcast. It's not political. It's not really libertarian at all. It's just me and my buddy kick back, and in the same way that you guys use movies to discuss kind of political philosophy and things of that nature, he and I use movies to discuss our flawed friendship and talk wicked smack to each other. It's a lot of fun, and it's mostly a lot of horror and cult movies and more obscure, silly B movies and so bad it's good kind of stuff. So that's kind of my second love after these ideas that we're about to talk about this evening. So this is a perfect episode. All things considered.
All right. Sounds good. And I did listen to a couple of your episodes. Now, not in a while, I gotta admit, but I do recall the Drac slap, which you guys were talking about the social distancing and the ability to slap each other at distance. And I think that was the punishment for even mentioning anything related to the pandemic, right?
Right. We try to keep the podcast relatively out, like an escape from all the craziness that's going on right now. That Drac slap thing lasted maybe 1, maybe 2 episodes. And basically the premise was anytime that one of us mentioned anything remotely related to the coronavirus, whether that be saying the word social distancing or talking about masks or whatever, the other person got to slap the other person for saying those things. And it's all real. It was all real slaps. And yeah, like I said, that lasted maybe 1, maybe 2 episodes, and we were like, we should probably stop doing this because we're grown men in a room slapping each other right now. So,
all right, now, Robert, I got to just direct a question to you. Does that not sound satisfying to be able to slap someone whenever this gets brought up? I can see it only lasting a short time, but it would be a great time for that short period of time.
Now, you could slap anybody for any reason, and this is all agreed upon beforehand?
Not any reason. It's you get this. We call it a Drac slap because we're convinced that the coronavirus is a product of like some sort of greater Dracula agenda. So anytime you're in a situation where you want to escape from the current state of the world and you don't want to talk about it, anytime someone mentions that, you get to Drac slap them as hard as you can.
Now, what explain? Okay, so it's just an open hand slap to the face.
Yeah.
Okay.
Not like a pimp.
So if you were telling a story to me and saying, I just got out of that gas station and there was only 40% of the people had masks on and no one was social distancing. If you said something like that, I would get to slap you.
Oh, well, I completely I'm on board with that. Yeah, no,
yeah.
Of course.
It's like fun negative
I'm not a
reinforcement.
monster.
Right.
Yeah.
So, Drac slap. Let's go worldwide.
So let's bring it back. Let's bring back the Drac slap.
Okay. I'm glad that this is transitioning into other podcasts now.
Yeah, we're spreading like a virus. It's going to be a pandemic.
I can't Drac slap you over
episode.
Yeah.
Yes, it's the new health
helicopter.
Hysterics is about the Drac slap. So you heard it here, folks. Lastnighters.com/145 show notes more and Drac slaps and more. And let's get into the Google description here. Let's see here. I'm sharing it on screen. So if you guys are watching this on the YouTube, so we have youtube.com/lastnighters, you can watch the live stream recording of our episodes. You can see our ugly faces and Snobby Bobby's beautiful visage. And you can also see the Google description that I'm about to read you now. So Demolition Man came out in 1993, rated R. It's an action sci-fi film, 1 hour, 55 minutes. 6.7 on IMDb, 60% Rotten Tomatoes, 34% of Metacritic. However, 92% of the Google users liked it. The description reads, with innocent victims caught in the crossfire in Los Angeles' intensifying war on crime, both cop John Spartan, played by Rocky Balboa / Rambo, John Rambo, and violent thug Simon Phoenix, Wesley Snipes, are sentenced to a state of frozen incarceration known as CryoPrison. When Spartan is finally thawed 36 years later, it's 2032, and Los Angeles is now a pacifist utopia called San Angeles. But with Phoenix again on the loose, Spartan must team up with the future cop Lenina to apprehend the killer, and she is played by Sandra Bullock. This came out October 8th, 1993, so we're almost actually right on time as far as when we're doing this episode. Oddly enough, that's totally coincidental.
Mm-hmm.
The director is Marco Brambilla, $57 million budget with a $159.1 million US box office. So they did pretty well at the box office there. And Robert, let's go to you for your opening on this one, buddy.
Are Google users just clapping seals? 92%?
We're gonna have a problem, Robert. I think
is this movie is so bad. It is get 'em boys level good in terms of the writing. In fact, there are 2 times in this film where Wesley Snipes essentially says "get 'em boys." That's all you really need to know. This movie is mostly hilarious and interesting and fun because of the ridiculous world it builds. It's got all these hilarious things that are illegal that are, I mean, like CNN level retarded. Like, I don't know which is more absurd. The idea that Taco Bell won the restaurant wars. Cops are shocked by violence. There are no guns anymore. They only exist in museums. Bad language is illegal. Salt, which you can't live without, is illegal. Sex is illegal. I know it's played up for jokes, but they're actually building a world that is you're supposed to kind of take it seriously, right? I mean, it's not like a commentary on anything. It's just a collection of retarded things that maybe the writer thought was funny, sort of. but it's so nonsensical that all it is played for laughs, me laughing at the movie, not me laughing with the movie, if that makes any sense. Stallone as this sort of sexually attractive leading man, which is hilarious to me. I don't get his appeal. Anytime he was on, doing any kind of romantic thing with Sandra Bullock, it was super cringy. Especially since they kind of hinted that Sandra Bullock was his daughter. At least that's how the impression that I got. So each time that they got physical or anything happened between them, I was like, oh, this is going to be super cringy when it's revealed that she's his daughter. But then I was like, oh no, I'm giving this movie far too much credit. It's just a totally dumb, brainless action movie that makes zero sense. So it was a lot of fun to watch it, especially just to go back in time and see just the quality of. I remember this movie being like a pretty big production. Like this is at the height of Stallone's powers. Wesley Snipes, justice for Wesley, by the way, shouldn't have ever had to deal with any of that bullshit that he had to deal with. Yeah,
he's out now, right?
I think so, but he had to fight for a long time, and he had to go in for a while. But this was like a big budget kind of a movie, and looking back, it looks so terrible. It just looks atrocious. I mean, the sets are kind of hilarious in that, like, the main bad guy has this kind of Luciferian lobby room or office room with this giant fireplace. It's hilarious, but
becomes important later.
Yeah, it's a plot point. But I mean, I don't know. I'm sure you guys maybe enjoyed this movie. Ironically, I could sort of get on board with that, except I don't think it's good enough to get on board with that. But I mean, I'm here to talk about this. I think it's more fun to go over the hilarious things that are illegal in this movie and how this society just could never work in a million years than to actually talk about the merits that this thing actually has. But I'm all ears. I want to hear Bobby's defense and Daniel's sick, twisted enjoyment of this thing. So,
all right, Robert. Well, enhance your calm, buddy. Enhance your calm, because we're about to open the pod to the depths of the wasteland here. And thank you for sharing your joy
to fiber up each other.
Yeah, thank you for sharing your joy feelings about this film.
I will MDK you later.
I think that there's a lot to what you're saying. However, I think that the set pieces, the scenes are awesome. I mean, that's where the money went, was in creating this world that we see. And yeah, the writing is atrocious, and Stallone is not the greatest actor. It's almost like the thing that Verhoeven was apparently fearing when he was reading the RoboCop script, that it was just this stupid action movie with really poor writing and cheesy lines and lots of beat 'em up and kung fu and explosions. But
there's more to this movie than that.
But there is more to this. And I think a lot of it has to relate to the current crises that we're all experiencing and living through. Do you remember?
No way. You cannot historically revisionist this shit. You can't say these geniuses predicted the pandemic.
They did.
They showed a movie where they made sex illegal because you can't have people doing risky behavior in the threat of a virus. So this movie is prophetic and therefore it's good. No, I reject that horseshit.
Right. Okay. So remember back in March when this first started going down and everyone was buying up all the toilet paper, and everyone's like, what the fuck? Why is everyone buying up all the toilet paper? This is so weird. I better buy some toilet paper too. So there were memes going around at that time. You better start to learn to use the 3 seashells. Ties directly back to this movie. Also, the Rob Schneider untouching high five. The maintaining social distancing, all those things.
None of this.
This is a very prophetic.
Just because this movie has entered the pop culture does not make it good.
I'm not saying it's a good movie.
Ed Wood movies are in the pop culture.
Yes. But this is it brings up a lot of things that I think are actually very interesting and are relevant to today. And I also have that nostalgia with it because it is over the top, corny, and cheesy, but that's what makes it fun. So let's tie over to...
This was an action film. This was like a big blockbuster summer action film. They were not trying to cheese this movie. They took themselves seriously.
Okay.
I would like to speak. I would like to respond to Robert.
All right, Bobby. You
and
you
his
put me in my place.
allegations. His allegations.
Yes. Though I can sympathize with what you just said, I am highly triggered and sulking right now at that description. First of all, Robert, this is early 90s, post cop worship, war on drugs, big muscle action film, 80s, like kind of the crest of all that, right?
But I'd say it's the tail end, but yeah.
Okay. So, but here's the thing. This was 100% meant to be both a satire and a parody of that. Like, it's trying to be schlock, but at the same time, it's unexpectedly smart. Okay. So you got to, this is how I felt when you were talking. You have like near future authoritarian satire, right? But it's not in the cynical Orwell, Huxley, Burgess kind of way, right? But despite of all that, it still hits a lot of marks, right? It has, like you were saying, the things that you were complaining about are a lot of the things I love about it. You got like schlocky gunfights and chase scenes. You got bad one-liners. You have a great world building with very subtle attention to detail and an unexpectedly strong and prophetic social commentary that is way ahead of its time. The point is, Demolition Man has everything, and it should not be as good as it is, because rarely in sci-fi do you get both Star Wars and Star Trek. But for whatever reason, Demolition Man pulls this off.
Dumb is dumb. Dumb isn't accidentally smart. This
self-aware
movie
dumb is fine.
Dumb.
Okay. Well, agree to disagree. That's the episode, folks, right?
And we're done. No, I think that they were fully aware that they were making an over-the-top action movie, and you can just tell with how corny it is. Like, when else do you see Stallone be this over the top?
Every movie he's ever been in.
You think so?
Other than Rocky series.
And Rambo 1.
No, but then Rocky 1. Rocky 1, that was actually kind of realistic, and then the latest Rocky, but every Rocky in between and every other thing he's ever done. The Expendables.
Stop or my mom will shoot.
Thank you. All the Rambo movies, except for the first one.
Well, the Expendables are all send-ups.
Yeah, the Expendables are just as kind of like tipping the hat to what this is trying to tip the hat to as well. Again, ahead of its time. It's self-referential. It's very meta. It's making fun of what was going on in Hollywood with action movies 4 or 5 years earlier. That's kind of the point.
Yeah, they even had the
jokes. This is the movie that Austin Powers made fun of with its whole cryogenic unfreezing scene.
I don't think this is the first time cryogenic freezing's happened in a movie.
No. This movie very much plays off of Empire Strikes Back.
Right.
And
that whole cryo scene felt very familiar to that.
Yeah, and again, there's a fine line between, parody and homage and satire and all those things. And I think that I don't think that it was accidentally bad, is all I'm trying to say. Like, it wasn't accidentally cheesy. I think that they were actually trying to poke fun at the genre that happened in the previous
You think
decade.
that there was a tongue in a cheek in this film?
Oh, yeah, 100%. 100%.
Really? Man, it read so straightforward to me, so serious to me. I know there were some jokes
because
with Stallone like swearing and whatever, and he said a few jokes, and the cops were intentionally kind of dumb and stupid. But
and granted, the comedy, I mean, I think it's a pretty funny movie, but it is like that kind of early 90s, like kind of audience friendly Rube comedy. I'll give you that. But
because it is a fish out of water story, right?
Right. It's a fish out of water story. And what's great about it is like it is a fish out of water story, but it's not like a caveman in the modern world. It's not like Encino Man or like Charlton Heston's on a monkey world or like Spock is in the 1980s San Francisco. It's Marty McFly in the Old West. No, it's like everyday Joe muscle bound 80s action star, but let's throw him 40 years later in this uber PC like Hillary Clinton fascism world and see what he does with that. And you got to say, like, no one's really done anything like it's unique, right? It's like different.
Well, I do appreciate that they did all those kind of measures were put into place for like the greater good, and they kind of present like this kind of hell world that they all live in. I did appreciate that.
Yeah.
Right.
I mean, the premise is great, and it's a great demonstration of the failure of central planning. Just it happens to be in a cheesy package.
But that's the point.
I'm not on board with this intentional cheese.
They were towing the line
with it.
Okay, all right, that's fine. Well, whether it was intentional or not, I love the cheese factor of this movie. And granted, that's not a everybody preference, but yeah, it's rough and tumble 90s cop in 40 years in the future.
I wonder if they sold this movie to Stallone as a comedy. I mean, I don't know. Maybe.
I get a feeling that Stallone is actually a really smart guy. Like, he wrote Rocky, and he has, in many of his films, and I know you disagree, Robert, you've already said you did, but I think he actually has a lot of heart and a lot of ability in his acting. He's got some chops, and he likes to demonstrate that range from time to time. And I think in this particular movie, he was willing to go far into the cheese realm to make a self-parody. Like, they even make reference to Schwarzenegger in the Schwarzenegger library of Arnold being the president and what have you. So like they're doing a within the film poking fun at other action stars of the day. And this wasn't like peak Stallone.
This wasn't the first time they were doing that kind of stuff back then. Like, remember like Last Action Hero with Schwarzenegger? They were already in that, like, Jesus, like we were all really coked up and on steroids in the 80s. That was a wild time when we made Cobra and fucking Commando and all that shit.
And we took all stars. They took themselves very, very seriously. I agree.
Right. And I think that this is intentionally self-aware, and they were not taking it seriously at that point. They sobered up and said that was a wild time. Let's try to do it again now that we realize how silly it was.
I agree that there are some jokes. I agree that the world building may be intentionally hilarious. I don't know. Maybe you guys are right. I don't know. I mean, if there's an interview of the producers and the writers getting together saying that, hey, we were gonna create this kind of self-referential cheese movie.
How about this? If this film was made in '93, where open is 1996 Los Angeles with the Hollywood sign burning and this huge explosion action sequence with Wesley Snipes and Stallone. To place this futuristic movie just 3 years into the future before you have this hellscape of like mostly peaceful riots in Los Angeles, burning it down. Like, you see the helicopter come in and like nobody is anywhere doing anything productive. It's all just burned out cars and everything. And then we've got Snipes, who has taken a bus apparently with 30 passengers on it. Why would a bus still be operating in this hellscape? Like, I think that they're purposefully going out and saying, you know what, we're being ridiculous.
I thought that was obvious, but apparently now I'm being gaslit by Robert.
Well, no, I mean, maybe I'm just a moron, and I fully agree. I can admit to that possibility.
No. The word is cynic.
It read either the jokes just didn't land, or I read it far too straight.
When you say
but
jokes,
you guys were totally.
Go ahead.
Any of the jokes, the world building ridiculousness, the bus thing, then the actual cops being completely devoid of any kind of real intelligence.
So let's talk about the world building, because the world building, I thought, is like, this is one of those movies where the world is like a character in and of itself, right? Like it's nothing without the world. So do you feel like the world was a little too on the nose? Was it trying too hard? Was it not subtle enough? Was it not smart enough? Talk to me what bothered you about the world building.
Well, I don't know exactly how to feel about the world building. So you guys could maybe push
strong
me
opinions on
one way or the other. But the world, okay, so either the writers were dumb, or they were, as you guys say, were being like really clever about things. So none of the world building makes sense. I like salt being illegal. You're going to die in a couple days without salt. Sex being illegal. That's never going to happen. Guns gone. Never going to happen. That's some liberal fantasy.
That's
Cops
the whole
being
point.
shocked by violence. An earthquake in 2010 causing such damage that a messiah forms in society due to the existential threat of earthquakes. There needs to be a persistent existential threat for people to get behind a strong man to change the world. You can't just have this one-off thing that may or may not happen. Ridiculousness. I get you that the Taco Bell thing was obvious. Obvious joke is obvious. Okay. The Schwarzenegger thing. Obvious joke is obvious.
They reference Rambo in it.
Which is...
Yeah, Snipes says, where's the Rambo shit or something like that.
Yeah. I mean, that right there is just, I would argue, proves my point about that it's very self-aware and trying to poke fun at all the things you're complaining about. And you got to think of like the issues of the time. It's like, yes, they don't, there's not some big exposition where they like show how they really got there. There's some dialogue where they talk about like, AIDS, crime, ozone layer, red meat, smoking, how that's all outlawed to, cultivate this like harmonious society. And those were all things of the early 90s that were, preached to everyone about, don't do XYZ. And then it just kind of explores like what happens when you have this institution come into play and actually forbid those things. And
if the script is actually intelligent, like you guys are seen to be claiming,
I think this movie's like, and I'm repeating myself, but I think this movie is like really unexpectedly smart.
Okay. So if the script is like super smart, like you're claiming, why is the dialogue so bad and dumb?
Because it's poking
it's intentionally
fun at...
bad and dumb. You're making a movie for a vast audience to try to make a lot of money.
I'm not going to say it's
trying to appeal to the lowest common denominator.
No. I'm not going to say it's intentionally dumb all the time. Sometimes it is just like early 90s, like I said, like rude comic relief that's for a general audience that doesn't hold up well by today's standards. Like, granted, yeah, there's definitely some of that. But as far as the over the top action sequences and set pieces and like quippy one-liners, like Simon Phoenix, Wesley Snipes' character is basically the Joker. Like he's just, you know what I mean?
Yeah. Just a silly psychopath for like no reason. He had zero character, which made his dialogue ridiculous at the end.
And that's like, I don't think, like, again, some of it was probably just stuff that doesn't land today. And I think a lot of it was, you look at like the kind of like Billy Badass 1980s action one-liner type movies where, welcome to the party, Richter, and all that shit, and all the Schwarzenegger stuff, the radioactive man stuff, the Up and Adam, that kind of stuff. That's The Simpsons, but you know what I mean.
Yeah, I do.
It's poking fun of that. It's kind of taking that same idea and exploiting it for parody.
Right, and then I think also the Sandra Bullock character was doing the. She's making fun of the present day 1993 stuff because she's nostalgic for that, but from the future. So she gets everything slightly wrong or like misinterpreted. And so all of her lines are like obviously cheesy because they're intentionally wrong. And then Stallone's like correcting her.
And
like,
I will grant you
really licked his ass.
That got tiresome by like the 40th time. That's like most of Sandra Bullock's dialogue in this movie is her getting phrases from the 90s wrong. And it's kind of cute for like the first 3 or 4 times, and then maybe you do a callback at the very end, right before the credits roll or something like that. But they really do flood the market with Sandra Bullock's confused phrases of the 1990s, and
not a whole lot of demand.
That relatively annoying.
Not a whole lot of demand for that. And you know what? This came out when I was in high school, and this should have been the Sandra Bullock fantasy girl movie, but I found her very annoying. And so when I saw her in this and then in The Net, I was like, I'm done. I don't like this girl anymore.
Well, this was
she was flooding the market with her face back then.
Well, this was actually one of her first vehicles. Like, it was a big budget vehicles because I think Speed came out the next year, and then The Net, and then we have Speed 2 Cruise Control. What else did she do? I don't know. And
then The Blind Side was like a comeback, right? Or Miss Congeniality.
Oh yeah, that's a good one.
She was in a million movies.
I love Sandy.
Yeah, she's been in a bunch of movies. But yeah, I think the corniness of her character in this was overdone. I really liked Dennis Leary, though he's just playing himself.
Yeah. Okay. And a lot of that really powerful speech about freedom that he gives, that monologue, is a lot of that was apparently improvised, but it just sounds like some rant he goes on.
Yeah, it sounds like some of it's stand up. Yeah,
when he's doing stand up and ripping off Bill Hicks. So, but I remember like watching this, and granted, like I'm assuming, Robert, this is the first time you'd seen this movie
since 1993 or whatever.
Okay. So I owned this movie on VHS. It's like one of the first R-rated movies I ever had and seen, for that matter. And it was like kind of in regular rotation in my house growing up by my choice. No one else really watched it with me. But that said, I will say that I could be a little biased because of the nostalgia there. And I'm trying to kind of take those blinders off and understand where you're coming from. And I was just busting your balls when I called you a cynic. But at the end of the day, I remember even at like 9 years old when I was watching it, like, identifying with Dennis Leary's character. And I honestly credit this movie for like awakening some sort of like libertarian spirit inside of me.
Well, I did see one of my big problem with both your guys' takes on this film, treating it like it's a satire, is ruining all my commentary where we were going to take this movie seriously and pick it apart for its, themes.
We can do that.
Well,
yeah, we could still do that.
We're going to still
totally
do that? Okay,
yeah.
So there's the scene when Stallone first sees Dennis Leary. He's stealing food from the Taco Bell, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then they get in a fight. But then when he finds out, they're just stealing food. Well, I'm not going to beat this guy up for stealing food.
Okay.
So he's kind of making a moral judgment there that theft is okay as long as he's feeding his family. And then we got to talk about the world of them not wanting to live in this upstairs world of hell. So the Eloi live in the underworld, but they live for free. They live free, but then they still have to steal because they don't want to eat rat burgers all the time. They want to eat Taco Bell's, whatever Taco Bell. It's not meat, right? Because meat's illegal. So it's like what? Silicone, right? I don't know. Whatever it is at the Taco Bell that they're eating.
Oh, it's probably some vegetarian, vegan something.
There's no meat at real Taco Bell, like regular Taco
Right,
Bell. Like.
exactly. So it's not a big difference, but
Right.
So do you guys want to talk? You have any thoughts on that?
Is that some sort of criticism as like the community, like the like squandering, like I guess freedom loving community that does not want to subscribe to this society? Are you criticizing because it doesn't look the way it like it's somehow glorifying some sort of like justification of like the poor stealing, or what are you getting at with that? I'm trying to
for a
psychoanalyze.
society where the cops where violence doesn't happen at all, so that the cops are so shocked by any kind of physical violence, like they watch Wesley Snipes beat up some cops and they're like, oh my god, I haven't been trained for this, I don't even know what this is, what's happening. Right. The entire society is structured around force, where they are using force against people for doing all kinds of normal shit.
Saying bad words,
having sex.
But it's force via like it's like compliance via policy and like
but this would suggest that there are no resistors.
Well, there are resistors. They live underground.
Right. They live underground, but everybody above ground is somehow all in agreement, which is not representative of any real world ever anywhere.
Well, that's the thing. Like, I think that, you know, obviously we're the audience sees this world through the eyes of Stallone. He's kind of like he represents the time in which it came out, the fish out of water, as you mentioned earlier. And then, like the kind of more renegade types that wouldn't like to subscribe to this world would be the Dennis Leary underground people. That are like, I would rather live in squalor than be free than live amongst these like neoliberal, fascist, politically correct weirdos. But is it like, to your point about like, how did we get here and why would people accept it? I mean, there's like the boiling frog situation. There's situations in history where things do get incredibly dire and desperate, and you know, civilizations collapsed and it's very difficult to get food, and then a tyrant will rise up and promise law and order and create this world in his vision, and people will just sit back and accept it a lot of times.
Right. And he's not even not even presenting himself as a tyrant. He's presenting himself as a scientist, bringing progressive change and providing like these moral values to everyone to make society better in this central planning kind of way. Like this. Right. Yeah. So Robert, go ahead.
One thing that made absolutely no sense to me was the fact that the Dennis Leary types, they live underground, right? They have guns. They're the only ones who have guns. You think Dennis Leary with his guns and a couple of his buddies with guns couldn't take over the whole freaking overworld? The cops couldn't do anything. What were the cops going to do? Sit there and stand off and go, now please arrest yourself, sir. Isn't that what they did when they were doing their Wesley Snipes?
But
it was ridiculous.
Missing the forest for the trees here. Like it's agreed. It's not like logically consistent. I mean, it's a silly action movie that's trying to be a satire. But they needed, you know, if you're going to have a commentary that either criticizes or brings to light the like hyperbolic world that this is based on early 90s PC culture, the antithesis of that is going to be everything you just mentioned. People, you know, living underground, and they're the ones with guns. They're the ones that still eat burgers. They're the ones that still smoke cigarettes or whatever it is. So again, it's like these people at top, have they accepted this due to desperation, or were they born into it and they don't know any different? And, you know, I get what you're saying about the fine details, but I don't think that was like it's one of those things that like doesn't really matter in the grand scheme of things.
Well, I'd also add that getting people to go along with a narrative, like we talked about a lot with Mike C last week on RoboCop, and you look outside the window today and you see all these people wearing masks and following along with every edict and hating Orange Man bad because he's orange, but you know, they if it was someone else saying the exact same thing, they totally agree with it. Yeah, that's where you get that kind of society. This is like seeing what our society is on a trajectory towards, especially in regard to social media, but played out into, you know, their real lives or their like everyday lives, being, you know, fined for misspeaking no matter where they are in their environment. They even mention when Sandra Bullock's character calls the warden at the prison, her boss is listening in on the conversation. Like, you're constantly under surveillance. You're constantly needing to abide by this progressive world like structure that, you know, as long as you're wanting to be a part of it, you need to abide by these laws, and so you're going to pay those fines if you want to maintain being in good standing in that society. Otherwise, you end up underground as what do they call them, the scrap or the rejects, something like that.
Yeah, and that made me think about, you know, in our, you know, I don't even want to call it the political climate, but that's really what it is, like with all the division that's going on right now with our current situation, which we're not going to talk about because I don't want to drag slap myself. That said, I mean, I feel like this story was trying to bring to light like the various factions or worldview, you know, archetypes or whatever of you know, different types of people in these societies. So like, what percentage of the population now would you think would see this movie and unironically prefer to live in the, you know, the Hillary Clinton world of Demolition Man? Like,
all the
Biden
voters,
right?
And fascists would enjoy the order.
Double
right?
down on safety over freedom.
Yeah.
It's not even like, I get that we, you know, it's not even like a reasonable, like, I get we need to like tread lightly to ensure our liberties are maintained, but we also need to grapple with the reality of XYZ and come together as a community and maybe put a little bit of force and via policy to make sure everyone behaves themselves. It's not that. It's like, no, fuck you. Your freedom is secondary to the, you know, the situation that we've built here, and it's for the greater good. So it's individualism versus like the safe collective, or perceived as safe collective.
right?
Yeah,
We
this
also
is
see
definitely depicting a society that has traded security for freedom, or
Right.
the other way
Right.
around. Yeah.
And we also see this like central planning it has stability for a while, but then it starts to break down because you can't account for individuals choosing different things, choosing different actions. You can't control everybody and pin them down all the time. You can't be this totalitarian and be so oppressive, and you can't plan all of these things and have it function smoothly.
And who is the character that exploits the role of the villain, or the secondary, I guess the secondary villain, or the criminal, the obvious criminal? Who is the person that exploits that for their own agenda and their own gain?
The central planner guy, Dr. Cocteau.
Dr. Fauci, or whatever his name is.
Yeah,
right?
exactly.
Is that much different than, you know, is that not reflective of things we've seen in real life?
Sure. Like you guys said, it's prophetic. I don't think you can. I don't think you can make this movie be good because it's accidentally prophetic. But you can find good wherever you want it.
Right, and
That's
to your
the
point,
spirit.
Robert, I think a lot of things is the perception that you bring to the movie. We've talked about this many times in the past, where I've looked at a movie, watched it from a certain perspective and didn't appreciate it, and then once I was aware of a different way of looking at it and watched it again, then I enjoyed the hell out of it.
Sure, absolutely. No, art's subjective. Absolutely.
It is. I mean, it is. It's that's what I like about this movie. It could be one or the other. It could be turn your brain off, like bad 80s action throwback kind of stuff. And it also has a little nudge of like what I thought, maybe it's nostalgia. Maybe I thought it was a lot deeper at the time. And that mentality that lens has resonated with me over the years when watching it. But I that's what's, like I mentioned earlier, like it has action adventure, silly Star Wars to it, and also has or at least tries to have, maybe not according to Robert, has a more, dare I say, philosophical or social commentary to it. Oh God, the look on your face right now.
Now, the one thing I noticed in the very opening was when, they have this like helicopter drop, send a maniac to catch a maniac. It's so obviously cheesy over the top that I think that sets the tone. And then when you get down into the warehouse that gets blown up, where they first confront each other, Simon Phoenix and Stallone's like, "You're under arrest." And Snipes responds, "And you're trespassing."
Cute.
I'm like, damn right, brother.
I'm sorry I ruined your evening with this movie, Rob.
Sorry, I got 30 dead
people. This
was
all Daniel's
there.
idea, by the way.
Yeah, I believe it. Hey, do you guys, the intro to this film is very similar to the intro with the Schwarzenegger movie where he's in a helicopter. Is it Running Man?
Yeah. Yeah, where he's firing on the, or he refuses to fire on the crowd, and then they say that he was the butcher of Bakersfield.
That's right. Okay, so that came out in what, 88, 89?
Mm-hmm.
So there's probably referencing that then.
Yes.
Okay. All right.
Yes. All right. I think we're peeling back some onion layers.
Making some progress.
Well, since the earthquake of 2010, I am somewhat removed from the world of 1993, so I don't remember stuff back then. It's all ancient history to me. People back then were cavemen.
Let me ask you this, Robert. And I did listen to the episode recently, but I don't really recall your overall perception of it. Did you enjoy RoboCop?
Yeah. I didn't rate it as highly as Daniel or our guest did. They both gave it, I think, 9s or 9.5s. I gave it a 7. I thought it was solid, but I didn't think it was as fantastic as they did.
But I mean, I guess what I'm getting at is like, what makes something like RoboCop more permissible than something like Demolition Man?
Yeah, because that also had a lot of the over the top, but I think it was maybe more obvious with the satire, the satirical commercials, and the news breaks about like the misguided laser beam.
I think the execution was what was better for me in RoboCop. I think when it took itself seriously, it was taking itself seriously. When it was being satire, it was being satire. This movie kind of like just all jumbles it all together. And so as an audience member, I was like, what am I supposed to take seriously here? What am I supposed to take as satire? I'm not sure how to feel about any given scene. So I was just left with kind of a detached sense of, hey, I guess I'm just watching these pictures go by. I didn't really get involved in the story at all. I don't know. It was also kind of hokey and corny and over the top with all the cheeseball dialogue, especially from Wesley Snipes, who was just this cackling jester character that was completely over the top.
Yeah, none of his stuff landed for me.
Which is an amalgam of every cardboard cutout 80s action villain.
But it just
I don't know if
wasn't
that makes
executed.
It forgivable.
It didn't feel smart. I guess that's my best critique. Is
I would agree with that.
It didn't feel like they knew what they were doing. It didn't feel like it was well executed. It didn't feel smart. When you watch something that you're like, oh, they really know what they're doing. This is obvious. Like they're doing it. Oh, it's so done well. So smart.
Yeah. And to its defense,
different in this movie.
To its defense, this movie went through like several script changes. There's various versions of it where it's a lot more serious. There's ones like the first draft, I want to say, was like a hard, obvious satire that was relatively serious. And then like studio didn't like it. It got passed around Hollywood for a while. There's like 3 different writers on this movie. So maybe maybe some of it gets lost there. But I think that if you were to dig into some research on it, that and it could be like The Room thing. I don't know if you guys are familiar with The Room with Tommy Wiseau. Like it's like one of the worst movies ever made.
We haven't watched it for the show yet, but we are.
It has a huge cult following. But if you watch, Tommy Wiseau would be like, "Oh, it was meant to be a comedy." I'm like, "You're not fucking Andy Kaufman. There's no way that this was meant to be funny."
Right.
And granted, it may have some of that, but if you watch, if you research it, they will openly seem to recognize and admit that, like, yeah, we were obviously poking fun at previous genre films from the previous decade. So I
Right.
don't know.
And I think they also present
not-
to you like a very easy to understand like why living in this world would be shitty. Like it's this idealized progressive utopia, but you can also see that there's all sorts of problems with it, that it would not be a place that anyone of independent mind would want to live in. And so that's the Dennis Leary character telling us, you know, like
Mhm.
how much of an affront this would be to individuality. And I think that's got to be intentional. I mean, that's like it's a key point in the film. You know, you've got this central planner. It's what is it? Well, let's get in the conspiratorial area, Bobby, just for you.
All right, thanks.
I don't know what the Latin term is, but it's famous in conspiracy circles. But it's order from chaos,
Mm-hmm.
and that is how the elites operate. Is that they will create problem reaction solution. So they'll create a problem, they'll have the ready-made proposed solution ready to go, and then the masses will clamor for it after this like false flag situation. So we open with 1996 Los Angeles burning, the Hollywood signs burning, busted up stuff everywhere. And then a few short years later, after this, there's a massive earthquake that apparently millions of people die in. And then you've got this savior that comes about providing the solution, which is this progressive utopian society where every thought, every utterance is policed, everything that you can choose to ingest or partake in is regulated, controlled, or made illegal. And I got to think that is like intentionally presented so that we can see that, you know, that would actually be a very terrible thing. As much as it sounds good, it ends up being a terrible thing.
Right. And this, that's interesting you bring that up, because I felt like this movie, I was trying to figure out if the filmmaker was trying to like point that out in like kind of a warning type sense, whether it be one extreme or the other, or, you know, bring to light the oppressiveness of what was a relatively popular, you know, worldview in 1993 of like, you know, I don't know, central planning and, you know, just kind of rank and file Democrat stuff, but taken to the extreme. But by the end of the movie, and I don't know if we can jump to the end, but we might as well, since it's a good segue. By the end of the movie, you know, the Demolition Man is kind of portrayed as this voice of reason that says like, hey, like we need to come together with law and order and cleanliness. And then also freedom is important too. So you guys need to meet somewhere in the middle. And like, then they just kind of like roll credits. And I'm like, oh, well, that wrapped it up nicely. And I thought that was a little on the nose. I thought that was a little cheesy. That it didn't leave it a little more ambiguous for the audience to reflect on the various like factions of this movie, or various groups that were, you know, invested in these types of cultures or whatever. So is it like, you know, in order to live in harmony, we need, I don't want to say centrist, but like we need some sort of balance between, you know, law and order / maybe like greater good collectiveness, but not excessively to the point, and also leave some room for individualism and freedom at the same time.
Yeah, I thought that was terrible. It was so it was quite, you're right. The Stallone character very end is very much the voice of the director writer, right?
Mhm.
It is the author intent there.
Yes.
And their solution, like you said, is this balancing between this wonderful, horrific hellscape world that's all pretty and terrible with the grimy freedom. And he's like, well, just balance the two.
Mhm.
When it's clear from the whole movie before that the Dennis Leary character is correct for the most part.
Do you think that this movie is like if I want to claim that it's smart or smarter than it should be, do you think that that's accidental, or are you more hung up on the fact that it's like relatively lazy, like it's almost there, but like it's just kind of like lackluster on that stuff?
It sounds to me like the original author had a good idea and he couldn't quite sell it as it was. So it went through multiple hands, and different writers had their hack at it and changed the intent and, you know, added their own take on it. And it just ends up being a bit of a muddled mess for me.
That's fair.
Typical
I'm
Hollywood
sorry.
studio interference, ruining a vision.
I feel so bad that you didn't like this movie.
I don't hate this film. I just think its execution is poor.
Right. So its execution. Okay. So that tells me it's more like, you know, watered down by the studio system mixed with a little bit of laziness and like maybe trying to mass market it or whatever it may be.
You're cramming in a romance. You're cramming in all this commentary. Right.
Oh, and by the way,
what is the movie? I mean, what is it?
By the way, the original script one of the scripts, she was his daughter.
Okay. Thank you for that.
They were going to old boy that. Or old boy was going to Demolition Man that.
Nice.
We're real film fans around here with the old boy references, huh? So
the original, not the fucking remake.
No, I didn't even see that, and I love Josh Brolin too. I will not watch that. But again, like just giving it the benefit of the doubt, like this movie, like I get where you're coming from in the complaints, but I would urge you to watch it again and not try to like pick apart the logical fallacies or like the like silliness of it all. And
my autistic brain cannot do
whether it's intentionally stupid or not, just pretend that it's intentionally stupid, and you might like it more. And given that it is, even if it is genuinely stupid, for whatever reason, it's able to pull off genuinely stupid with like some pretty fun kind of authoritarian sci-fi satire. It's a product of its time, but I'd be curious to see what the reaction was by the general public at the time. I know it was relatively well received. Obviously, it had a pretty big box office pull, but you don't think of Demolition Man as being like one of the great Stallone movies ever made. That's for sure. Even in the 90s.
Remind me again, Daniel, what the audience reviews were for the most part. They were pretty low, right?
Well, the Google was 92%.
Yeah. Forget the Google.
Let me see. Let me pull it up. But the box office, like Bobby was saying, was 150 million on a $56 million budget. So they did okay there.
Okay.
And then the IMDb is 6.7, 60% Rotten Tomatoes, and only 34% on Metacritic. So the critical consensus is it's garbage.
Critics are on board with it garbage. I'm more on time with the Rotten Tomatoes. Okay. Interesting.
So you were a big fan of Cuties, it sounds like.
Yeah, big Cuties fan.
Now I will agree.
You just didn't get it.
There are some lapses in this. Like all of a sudden after the shootout with Snipes down in the underground, then all of a sudden next scene they're like above ground and everything's hunky dory. And then there was another scene where like the Stallone's about to be arrested, and then all of a sudden he's like about to go into Cocteau's compound. It's like, okay, what happened in that intervening moment? Like there's no connective tissue for that.
Forgivable plot holes because this movie fucking rules.
You are simping so hard for this movie.
That's fine. I'll own it.
Well, I wanted to bring up a couple of things as we approach the hour of discussion so far. That I view this as a great premise of a failure of central planning. And when they talked about the police and how they have this like Sandra Bullock's character is like seeking some action, you know, she's so bored in what her job is. And I was like, only a government agency would still provide something that has very little demand. You know, why are all these cops still even existing if there's never any activity? There's never anything they need to deal with. Like they even said there hasn't been a murder, death, kill in like 14 years or something like that. And then what was ironic to me was when they said, what's a 187? What's a murder, death, kill? And then the not the main chief, but like the section chief guy is like 3 MDKs in one day, as if it's like, okay, you just established that this hasn't happened in a decade and a half. And now you're talking about it as if it's this commonplace thing. So it's like really weird to me. Anyway.
Yeah. So you're getting on board with the Robert train. I like it.
Yeah,
A little boy, it doesn't all fit. It
I
certainly
feel a
doesn't
little
all fit.
betrayed by that. To be honest with you,
You're supposed to be simping harder for this movie, Daniel.
Well,
Okay, so can we talk about the best line of the movie?
let's talk about it.
I don't even know what I don't remember the context of it, but Sylvester Stallone is saving this little girl, and this other woman says something or does something to the little girl, and she's like, "Fuck you, lady." That was a legitimately funny moment, and I'm mad at myself that I don't remember the context.
Oh, it's when Bullock was
the
going
beginning.
through the tapes of Stallone's exploits when she was going to thaw him out. Like, oh, here are his like positive arrests, and then her chief is watching that as well, and he's like, oh, he's going to be a great addition with his filthy mouth or whatever.
Do you remember the context of him saving the girl?
I think it was just like random. Like it was like she was researching him, like you were saying, Daniel, right?
Right,
Yeah.
but there's a video clip of him, like he's got the girl on his shoulder or whatever, and he's like walking away.
Yeah, so
Some other lady
Stallone had
comes up.
saved this little girl from some situation, and then this reporter lady was asking a question that was like inappropriate or
Yeah, that's what it was. I don't remember the question by the reporter though.
yeah, it was like a totally loaded question or something, and the little girl was like, "Fuck you, lady."
Oh, that's what it was. Oh yeah. It was the reporter lady was like, "Why would you destroy this whatever building with it's only worth it's worth like $50 million to save one little girl or something like that?" And the little girl was like, "Fuck you, lady."
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Okay. Yeah. That was a cute line. Another thing, my wife noticed this, and it bothered me too. When Sandra Bullock is like doing the interfacing with the computer, like, oh, who was on the parole hearing that morning and pulling up all this information, she's both talking to the computer, giving it commands, but also randomly typing.
Yeah.
And
yeah,
I was like,
no
okay,
sense.
one or the other, lady. Pick one, because you're obviously not doing both.
Yeah, all that seemed really like Hollywood's idea of the future is always hilariously bad, and that just shows how you can't predict the future.
Well, I was wondering since this conversation started if that was meant to be intentionally ridiculous. Like,
I'm on team yes on that.
She's verbally instructing the computer, and also randomly.
It wasn't funny enough for it to be intentional, though.
Subtle.
It just
subtlety
seemed bad. This movie is nothing. This movie is not subtle. You take that back.
Like,
how dare you?
I don't know who said it. I think like Bob Dylan said something to the degree of like art. You don't have to pick up the intention of the artist. It's up to the interpreter to kind of weave it into what you want it to be. And I guess I'm just like a half glass half full guy when it comes to that, Robert.
You know what? Fair is fair, sir. You can simp all you want for this movie.
I will
This
simp all
review
over
is
this one.
this review is the tale of the two Roberts here.
I honestly thought when I originally mentioned this movie would be good for you guys to cover, I thought that it would spark a legitimate amount of like libertarian philosophy conversation, but the majority of this episode has been me and Robert going back and forth whether or not it's genius or dog shit. So great. Good.
You
good
never
content.
know where these are going to go.
Yeah, that's fine with me.
Yeah, well, I think that Mike C would think this is a genius film.
Yeah, I think he's on board. I think he's on board with Bobby. But I would like to rapid fire do some libertarian stuff if you don't mind. I mean,
yeah, do it.
Taco Bell winning the franchise wars, is that what that was? I mean, there must be some, government, monopoly that's granting to Taco Bell, because otherwise I don't think Taco Bell is satisfying all restaurant needs in the city of San Angeles or whatever the name of the place was.
Yeah, it looked super fancy though. Like they'd certainly gone upscale. And wasn't there like by your mom's place in Seattle? Wasn't there like a fancy Taco Time or Taco Bell like on 45th?
Yeah, you're right. There is one. It's like all glass.
We got
one
of those.
It looks
serve
fancier
alcohol
on the outside than it is on the inside. It just looks like a normal Taco Time. But yeah.
Okay, yeah. So I always envisioned that because I remember seeing this film probably back in the 90s and then going down and visiting you when you were staying at your mom's
Yeah.
and going to that Taco Bell and be like, oh man, it's like in Demolition Man.
Mhm.
Well, Taco Time is an upscale Taco Bell. I don't know if you got Taco Times where you're at, Bobby, but Taco Time it's actually the upscale fake Mexican food.
Yeah, it is a little bit better, but I think it is pretty local. I don't know if they're outside of.
Yeah, we don't put
this
up
region.
with that shit down in Texas.
Yeah,
There's like
they got Tex-Mex.
There's like 2 or 3 Taco Bells that I can think of in town. Well, there's probably more than that, but they don't do very well.
The worst Mexican food I've ever had was in Austin, Texas, and it was some shithouse chain that was like a Taco Bell. I think it was Taco Cabana.
Taco Cabana is only good if you're like coming back from the bar at 3 a.m. and just order the nachos. Don't order anything else, and you'll be good.
But don't get an Uber because they're illegal.
That's
in
right.
Austin?
Yeah.
Well, they were for a while. I don't know if they're back anymore.
We've been back for like 3 years now.
Okay. Yeah.
And a lot of people just did it underground anyway. Like I remember that, but like no one really felt it. Because
back when we started this podcast, that was like one of our main stories.
We were the pro Uber podcast, man.
Yeah.
They were constantly having to deal with bullshit from Toronto to Austin to LA to San Francisco, whatever.
What was the thing that happened in California? Well, what doesn't happen there, but like something about like some regulation on like independent contractors in the name of like workers' rights or some shit, but it just ended up having some awful.
Yeah, they have to be like considered employees and then thus be qualified for benefits. So then they're just like, all right, well, we can't operate here then.
Right. That's it. That's what it was. It was about a year ago, I think.
Yeah, because you can't do it profitably. You know, like you can only charge so much for the ride, especially when there's other competitors. And there was a taxi, monopoly, so you can undercut them. But if you can't charge like more than a certain amount, then you can't afford to make everyone an employee and give them like the mandated health coverage or whatever else is required of employees in California.
Robert, I have a question for you, sir. Just
here.
because I'm fascinated by your reaction to this movie. Because I don't
it's
know you
nice
very well.
I don't know if that's an insult or a compliment.
No, not at all.
Right.
Not at all. Like I'm all whatever. I'm a simp, so it doesn't matter. But what would you consider your like favorite dumb movie is?
Oh wow, what a good question. Favorite dumb movie. I was hoping. I remember having fondly remembered Idiocracy. Then we went back and did it, and it wasn't as good as I recall.
Mm-hmm.
If I'm going to go dumb, so like dumb comedy, kind of like screwball.
I would
argue
Idiocracy's smarter than most comedies, even though it may not hold up since the first time you saw it. It still has something to poke fun at that's legitimate. It's a satire in and of itself. So, yeah, like what is like a turn your brain off like movie that you enjoy, like National Treasure or National Treasure 2, The Book of Secrets, perhaps?
both fine films.
You guys should do a National Treasure 2 episode.
I'm sure there's some Nicolas Cage treasure film that's just incredible.
All right, I'm going to make you a list. I'm just going to make you a list, and we're just going to crack this mold of hatred for all things stupid.
Oh, he liked the Pee-wee movie.
I know.
I like lots of dumb movies. Mm-hmm. It's just that this movie, I think it tries to do too much, and it doesn't decide what it wants to. For me, I'm sure you found the genius in it. You guys were able to analyze it with your Terminator 2 lenses, but I, with my human eyeballs, I didn't know how to feel about this thing that was trying to do too much.
Hey, nobody's mad at you. Nobody thinks any less or disrespects you any more or less after this conversation. I just want to know.
Everyone feels exactly the same.
Exactly. The same level of
this was certainly
disdain. Yeah, exactly. No, I didn't disappoint and I didn't impress. It's
that's good though. Like when you have these kind of conversations, it's always like I was honestly thinking we were all just going to get on this call and just circle jerk about this movie all night, but I'm glad it wasn't that, to be honest.
That was just a two-way Two-way circle jerk.
Yeah, it was just a hate jerk.
All right, Robert. Well, it sounded like you were getting started on a final summary review. So since we are well over time, why don't you just continue on with your overall take and then give us a score, like number of seashells.
Well, I will say that you guys have raised some interesting points. I definitely didn't see it with my rose-colored glasses on. I saw it quite differently. The way I read it, I love how you can look at art and two different people will see two different things. This is definitely a case of that. I saw a movie that didn't know what it was trying to be. I thought it was just a muddled mess. For just as an example, I forget the line that he says, but the Wesley Snipes character is such a nothing of a character. And I get you're trying to say that he's just some kind of like satire of every nothing character. But I don't know if you can satire somebody who's nothing by just being nothing again. I don't know how that works. So the Wesley Snipes character is so nothing that at the end, during the big final fight, where he's supposedly coming to final terms with this super cop who's been chasing this whole time, and they should have some kind of history. They should have some kind of shared experience that they're pissed off at each other about, or some kind of emotional substance at all. The Wesley Snipes character just spouts nonsense lines. Like, it has nothing to do with the plot. He's just saying dumb shit that means nothing. And I can't remember the exact line that he said that triggered this in my mind. But he said some nonsense line. And I'm like, that was the place where you're supposed to actually put something that relates to the plot of the film. This was like obviously a placeholder line that the writer was like, we'll come up with something better later. But they never changed it. And it didn't make sense when he said it. And it even looked like they 80 yarded in, which didn't make any sense either. But it's like it was in the script and they had to say it during this fight and it made no sense. And it just illustrated how there was nothing between these two characters. There was the Wesley Snipes character was such a nothing character. In order for, the reason Darth Vader is such a great villain is because he is the Dark Luke. He's the Luke that went down the other path. He's the shadow character to the hero. He's everything that the hero could be should he choose that path, but he didn't. In this movie, I get it. You guys think it's a satire. Fine. But I read it very seriously, and as a serious film, it was nonsense. So I cannot, in good conscience, I see that there's some interesting, fun world building going on. And if you were to view it with your guys' experience that this is a satire, then I can understand your ratings being much higher than mine. But I cannot, in good conscience, give this a positive rating. This is like a 4. It didn't speak to me as an audience member at all, and I don't understand the appeal to this shit show. But anyway,
4 seashells out of 3 seashells.
4 seashells by the seashore. Out of as many seashells as are possible.
Yeah, so normally our scores are out of 10, but there's only the 3 seashells. So Robert's given it a tremendous score.
1. No, I'll give it 1 seashell. 1 out of 3 seashells.
Wow.
Okay. All right. That's pretty rough. That's pretty rough stuff.
Yeah.
Now, I'll agree that this is not perfectly executed. However, I think that the intention was good and that they very nearly pulled it off. There are just a couple of areas where there were like some kind of missing filler between some of the scenes for it to make sense. But I think that they were going for a satirical take on the action movie genre of the late 80s. They were self-aware, as Bobby has been saying. I think that they overplayed the Sandra Bullock trope of like mispronouncing things from the 90s and being nostalgic for it. But I think that was purposeful. There's a reason that was there. I really enjoyed that it shows how this perfectly planned society is still horrendous. Like all of these things, it looks utopian and it looks like things are great, but you could be fined for an utterance. And if there's a repeated violation, then the police are contacted. It's actually not too far off from what Facebook will do to us today if you get repeated violations. In fact, this very stream that we're doing right now, apparently, I looked into it as I was trying to get it to go live on Facebook. It says this user is no longer allowed to do live streams. So apparently we've upset somebody, Zuck perhaps, but we cannot do live streams on Facebook any longer. But I really enjoyed it. I think that's very prescient, and especially with the social distancing and the pandemic stuff that's been going on, where they're sort of like showing this lack of contact and making, human interaction illegal and having microchips in people. It seems to be where we're going, and I'll let Bobby riff on that for a little bit. But overall, I think it's pretty, when viewed from a certain perspective, this can be a very good film. And so I'm going to go with a 7 out of 10. And I guess that would be, for rounding, it'd be 2 out of the 3 seashells. So we'll go to you, Bobby.
Okay. First and foremost, this is objectively an intentional satire on par with that of Voltaire's Candide. And I'm still shell-shocked by the reaction, but that's okay. We don't need to go down that road again. I like a film that can appeal or appeal to, or kind of like deceive a general public into thinking. And granted, yes, it's not the most profound social commentary, and it is silly and over the top and hyperbolic, but there's not much more I can say that I haven't already been saying. This movie should not be as good as it is. And that's one of the main reasons why I love it so much, because it does toe that line between absolute, utter, silly 80s action and then still throws it into this world of some sort of social reflection of the real world. So I would give it 2.5 seashells out of 3.
All right. 2.5. That's pretty good. It's pretty high up there.
Robert's like playing Candy Crush on his phone right now.
I was trying to find that's the line that he says. I'm sorry, I did. I'm so close to finding it. If you guys want to buy me just a few more minutes.
Oh yeah, we could buy you a moment. We could buy you a moment here. Well, like I said, I like the take on when viewed from today's lens, that we see how they're treating anyone who disagrees with this perfect society as if they're a terrorist, and that they have to be eliminated and demonized, and that their focus is on safety above everything else. I think they even say safety above all. And that's what Cocteau is like offering to the masses. Like, hey, you've gone through these riots, you've gone through these peaceful protests, you've gone through this massive earthquake, and now I'm going to present to you this vision of society where safety is paramount, and it's the utmost thing, and it's the thing that drives everything else. And again, he finds frustration with it and needs to thaw out this supervillain from the past to take care of the Edgar Friendly character, the Dennis Leary character, because he's the fly in his ointment. He's the brush fire of liberty still out kicking, and he's trying to snuff it out.
Yeah, kind of like what Facebook just did with you on your live stream thing.
Allegedly.
Yeah.
All right, Robert, did you find it? Was that enough moment?
I think I found it. I'm 90% sure that this is correct. So Wesley Snipes he's got this metal rod, and he's about to jab it through Sylvester Stallone right before Sylvester Stallone smashes this super freezy coldy stuff and then kills him. but Wesley Snipes says they're having this moment between them right before he's going to kill him. The culmination of their characters coming together, and he goes, "This is the best day of my life." That's it. That's just that's all he says. And it seems like that could have been anything in relation to them and their experience together. Instead, he's just like, "I'm having a good time. I guess it's okay, but it's not the coup de grace that I was hoping for that triggered my mind, but it's still kind of nonsense, nothing." Anyway.
Yeah, it does sound like nonsense, nothing. I think that they're trying to, in the open, present that there is a history between Simon Phoenix and John Spartan. And so we're kind of dumped into this ongoing feud. It's already happening.
Right.
Yeah, they have this ambiguous good guy, bad guy thing from their past. I mean, clearly. And
then Phoenix frames Stallone for wantonly killing the 30 dead bus passengers who were already dead. It's revealed later. And how that sticks, I don't understand, but
yeah, neither do I. It's just brushed aside.
I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry, everyone.
It's a plot convenience for that to stick. But anyway, we've had a very good discussion.
I think so.
It was a discussion.
We had a discussion.
Take that away from us. You can't take that away.
About Demolition Man. I don't know if we covered everything that we had intended to, or it went the direction that we intended it to go, but it happened, and it's already been super long. So you can find the show notes and more for this at lastnighters.com/145. You can find Snobby Bobby's work at the Not For Everyone podcast. Check it out on the links on our page, and also, search for it wherever searches are made available to you. You can find it on iTunes/Apple Podcasts, Stitcher, and other varieties of places. And Bobby, were you trying to grab a moment?
Yes. Quick plug. Also, I work with Buck Johnson of the Death to Tyrants podcast pretty often, and I co-host with him on his Patreon episodes and occasionally on his regular episodes. So check out Death to Tyrants as well, which is a kind of an ANCAP podcast discussing the topics of the day with very interesting guests.
And I will double down on that. Buck has some great content. He has the likes of Jeff Deist on there, among others. He had Lou Rockwell on recently. So he gets some pretty big names on there. And he has I don't want to pigeonhole him, but it's maybe a bit of a harder edge to his libertarianism. And I think that a lot of people appreciate that, I being one of them.
He is not what you would call a prag.
Yes, that's the last thing
that
I would want to be called. So, well, hey, speaking of hard edges, next week we're going to get even harder. We're going to do The Postman, which only means the return of the great Pete Quinones, also known as Mance Raider of the Free Man Beyond the Wall podcast. It's a Kevin Costner film, so we got to have our Kevin Costner man back on. So Pete Quinones will be back with us next week for The Postman. The post office has been in the news lately related to ballots and all of that shenanigans, so I'm sure that it will be a very worthy discussion as we see Kevin Costner finally deliver the ballot from 2020 at some point in the future that decides the fate of all of mankind in the most important election ever. So join us next week for that. Now, Robert, if you can roll credits and let us know how people can support the work that we do, you do, and everyone else does around up in here.
Well, if you're still here after that discussion, thank you for lasting. And if you liked it somehow, some way, for some reason, some sort of sadomasochistic thing, then you could leave a comment. You can leave likes. You can subscribe. You can go to Trupster.com and buy some merch. You could tell your friends, family, if you're not too afraid to reveal your political views to them. And any other ways which you could do that. You can join Patreon, and then you could subscribe to us and give us actual Federal Reserve coinage, and then you will be accessing the inner circles of private listeners secure Facebook compendium thingamajigger. Yeah, that's what you do.
Yeah, as long as that works. It's not working right now, but I did put the YouTube live stream link in that super secret private group available for Patreon supporters. So even though the live stream is not working in Facebook itself, there's still a link to see us make the sausage live, which we're doing right now. So go to lastnighters.com/Patreon. You can get an hour and a half almost of pre-show bonus content. And hopefully, Bobby, if you still got a little fire in you, we can have you stick around for a little bit of the affectionately called Kathleen Turner Overdrive, which is the post-show content that we do here at Last Nighters.
You're going to hang out for a little while.
All right. Sounds great. Well, everyone, thanks for joining us, and we will see you guys next week for The Postman. And with that, we'll say good night from last night, everyone. Peace out.